中国教孩子仇恨日本，你是不是也听说过这种说法？但一个在中国生活了20年的外国人却给出了完全相反的答案。他曾在中国多所学校工作，亲自参与课程设计，深入了解中国的教育体系。他说，我从来没有在任何地方听到过教孩子仇恨的内容。更震撼的是，你知道二战后日本撤离时做了什么吗？他们把实验室里成千上万只感染病毒的老鼠和跳蚤直接释放了，导致战后死于传染病的中国人比战争中还要多。G311部队的恐怖程度完全不亚于奥斯维辛。经历了如此惨痛的历史，今天的中国街道上却跑着数百万辆日本车。中国的国际学校里，日本学生和中国学生一起上课，相处融洽。这位外国人说，中国人可能是世界上最宽容的民族。那么真相到底是什么？中国的历史课堂上究竟教了什么？为什么有些人拼命告诉你中国是敌人？今天让我们听听这位在中国生活了20年的老外，他会告诉你一个你可能从未了解过的真实答案。
China is not the enemy. The people who tell you China is the enemy are the people you should most fear. I've worked in several schools, I've helped create courses, I've worked within the Chinese education curricular systems, and I've never heard anything anywhere about teaching children, young adults, university students anywhere to hate. They do cover the Second World War in history, they do explain what happened in places such as Nanjing, which, believe it or not, and despite the atrocities there, was only the tip of a very large iceberg. Here's a fact many people don't know. When leaving China, the Japanese didn't know what to do with thousands of infected rats and fleas that they were working on in laboratories, so they just released them. Many more people in China died of infectious diseases after the war as a result of that decision. I've linked that, and believe me, it's quite horrifying and well worth reading to understand why the Chinese would hate the Japanese. I probably would. Unit 731, just outside of Harbin in China's northeast, Dongbei. The area the Japanese colonized and called Manchukuo is every bit as horrific as anything you've seen or heard of coming out of Auschwitz or the Cambodian killing fields. Despite all this, and even now, despite what Trump, the president of the US, is trying to do to China, throw them back to the Stone Age, there is no hatred towards Americans. I know many Japanese kids here in China. I taught in an international school for several years, and many of my students were the Japanese children of Japanese parents who had businesses here or were managing many of the Japanese corporations that are here. There were no problems. On a people-to-people level, Chinese are perhaps the most accommodating and forgiving people in the world. But ask them what they think of the Japanese government, and they do dislike them. Ask them what they think of Trump right now, and it merely amuses them. There's still no hatred. China has never in its entire nuclear history talked of nuking anyone. It has made it very clear, and is the only country to have done so without conditions, to say that it holds nuclear weapons as a deterrent. It will never first strike any country, and it will never strike a non-nuclear power with nuclear weapons. China is the only country in the world that has nuclear weapons to make those commitments. And it was Mao who made them. Successive leaders have endorsed the same commitments. So no, China has never threatened to nuke Japan. Japan is not a nuclear-armed country, so it will never do so. Unless, of course, the US sends nuclear bombs to Japan and uses that as a staging post to attack China, in which case the US staging post may very well suffer the consequences of USA's arrogance. What China does, it reminds kids in school of the futility of war. It doesn't seek revenge or even justice, but the government constantly asks for Japan to provide an apology, and also expresses disgust that senior leaders from other countries, including one senior Taiwanese elected official, sometimes visit a shrine to commemorate the fallen heroes of the Imperial Japanese Army, some of whom are criminals responsible for the massacres and inhumane treatment in China, as well as all over Asia. So if you go to Australia, you ask any elderly Australian what they think of Japan and what they did during the war, you'll get an equal or even worse reaction than you did if you ask a Chinese person. I'm sure. Overall, there are many Chinese people who hate Japan as a concept, but if you ask them, and I have done so, whether they ever met a Japanese person, they'll always say yes. And if they have, they don't hate the individual. They just hate what their government did and have not officially apologized for and are rewriting the history. There have always been Japanese factories, Japanese managers, Japanese owners and employees working in China, especially in the industrial areas. There are millions of Japanese cars on Chinese roads. Many products in Chinese homes come from Japan or Japanese brand. But at the same time, you'll see TV series where Japanese are depicted as the villains. This is not propaganda, this is TV entertainment based on factual events, unlike Western movies where war is often glorified and presented as something good. War in China is presented at what it really is, dirty, horrible and brutal. And as most of Asia knows, the most brutal exponents of it, until the USA started carpet bombing civilians in Korea and never looked back, were once upon a time the Japanese Imperial Army. So no, there are some people who hate Japan and the Japanese, there is no doubt about that, but if I go to any country in the world, I will find some extremists who hate Muslims, some who hate black people, some who hate Christians, and some who even hate me. It's a sad fact of life that hate does exist, but where it does, it's usually in very small amounts. And what's really worrying is how some industries, such as Hollywood, manipulate our emotions to create that hatred. That's what China won't do. Despite the fact that there are stories, and there are plenty of people who express anecdotal evidence that China does this, I've found no evidence that it's actually happened or is happening. In fact, all the evidence, if you can find it on Xiaohongshu, etc., you can come to China and see for yourself, points to the opposite. I've said it before, and I'll no doubt say it many more times before everybody believes me. China is not the enemy. The people who tell you China is the enemy are the people you should most fear. When I first started saying this several years ago, many people didn't quite believe me, but the number who do are very much more now that they're seeing the true colors of countries purporting to be peaceful. Those same countries have been bringing God to the heathens at the point of a sword, or democracy to the communists at the point of a gun, or the Muslims. Not everyone wants somebody else's God, and for sure, not everyone wants a Westminster system of democracy either. We should be thinking about that in the West.
听完这位在中国生活了20年的老外的讲述，我想你应该明白了，真相永远比我们想象的更复杂。中国没有教孩子仇恨，反而在教育他们战争的残酷和和平的珍贵。经历了那么多的苦难的中国人，选择了宽容，选择了向前看。街头的日本车，教室里的日本学生，都在证明了一个事实：普通人之间从来没有那么多的仇恨。但与此同时，有些人却在拼命制造对立，不断告诉你谁是敌人。为什么？因为恐惧和仇恨是最容易操纵人心的工具。当你忙着恨一个敌人的时候，你就不会去思考，到底是谁在从这种对立中获利。这位老外博主说的对，那些告诉你中国是敌人的人，才是你真正应该警惕的人。我们生活在一个信息爆炸的时代，但同时也是一个真相稀缺的时代。太多的声音在告诉你该恨谁，该怕谁，却很少有人告诉你去看看，去了解，去和真实的人对话。历史不能忘记，但仇恨不该延续。我们需要记住过去，不是为了复仇，而是为了确保悲剧不再重演。这才是真正的历史教育，这才是真正的智慧。所以朋友们，下次当有人告诉你某某是敌人的时候，先问问自己，我真的了解吗？我见过吗？还是我只是在重复别人想让我相信的故事？保持独立思考，保持好奇心，保持对真相的追求。这个世界需要的不是更多的仇恨，而是更多的理解。如果这个视频对你有所思考，请给我点赞、订阅、支持，这可以让更多人看到不一样的声音。记住，独立思考是我们对抗被操纵的最好武器。我们下期节目再见。